Today we're going to talk about SARS-CoV-2 vaccines and potential side effects. We'll cover the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine as well as the Moderna vaccine. Both of these vaccines were recently approved by the FDA for use, and both of these vaccines are mRNA vaccines. We'll talk about some of the most common myths about these vaccines, and we'll also cover what the actual side effects that you might experience after getting these vaccines might be. All right, let's talk about the myths first. One of the most common myths that I've heard is, can this vaccine modify my DNA? The answer to this question is no. These vaccines cannot modify your DNA. The molecule that's being used here is the mRNA molecule. mRNA stands for messenger RNA. In a normal human cell, mRNA is the transition state between DNA and protein. DNA is located in the nucleus and it encodes for all the possible proteins that a human cell can use. DNA is transcribed into mRNA, which is located outside of the nucleus in the cytoplasm. mRNA is recognized by ribosomes and translated into protein. This process of DNA to mRNA to protein is actually a one-way street within the normal human cell. So mRNA can be made into protein, but mRNA can actually never be made back into DNA in a normal human cell. It is true that there exists a mechanism called reverse transcription that does convert RNA back into DNA, but this is not a mechanism that exists within a normal human cell, so your cells are not capable of doing reverse transcription. In addition, the mRNA is located out in the cytoplasm, and it's actually away from the DNA that's in your cells. So they're never actually even in contact or in the same compartment as one another. mRNA is also intrinsically unstable. And actually, this is one of the reasons why these vaccines have to be kept at such cold temperatures. There's plenty of mechanisms within your cell that recognize mRNA and will degrade it. And what that means then is that any mRNA that isn't being translated into spike protein from these vaccines will actually become degraded over time. So even the mRNA that's being introduced into your cells as part of the vaccine will also be degraded and gotten rid of over time. So there's really no way that these mRNA vaccines can modify your DNA. Another common myth that I've heard is that, can these vaccines give me COVID-19? The answer to that is also no. This is an interesting concept because it's true that in the past, people have used more traditional methods of vaccine development using either the live virus or the attenuated virus as their vaccine. When you use a whole virus as your vaccine, it is possible in very rare cases that you might accidentally infect your patient with the virus rather than inducing immunity. This doesn't happen very common, but it's true that it does happen. In the case of the mRNA vaccines for COVID-19, what's clear here is that we're just using a single component of the whole virus to induce immunity. We're using the mRNA for the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, and it's just the spike protein, that one component, that's being used to induce immunity in your cells. What that means then is it's just the spike protein without any other components of the virus that is being used as part of this vaccine, and the spike protein of the virus itself cannot give you COVID-19. The third myth we'll talk about is around dosing. And this is the question, can a single dose be enough to induce immunity? What's important to understand here is that right now, these vaccines, Pfizer-BioNTech as well as Moderna, have been approved by the FDA as 2-dose vaccines. What that means then is that you must have 2 doses in order to get the immunity and the efficacy that we saw in the phase 3 clinical trials. So we've heard these numbers like 94 or 95% efficacy. And what we know is that you have to have both doses of the vaccine in order to get those numbers. In fact, neither of these 2 vaccine developers took a 1-dose vaccine through to FDA approval, and they did not include a 1-dose vaccine as part of their original phase 3 clinical trial design. What that means is that it might be possible that after a single dose, you could get some immunity, but we don't have enough data to really understand how durable that immunity might be, and we certainly don't know what the efficacy would be of just having a single dose. So if you are going to get these vaccines, you have to remember these are 2-dose vaccines, and actually there's different scheduling timing between the first and the second dose. For the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, you have to wait 21 days between the first dose and the second dose. And for the Moderna vaccine, you have to wait 28 days between the first dose and the second dose. It's really important to remember to get both doses and to get them at the right time interval. All right, we've talked about myths. Now let's talk a little bit about side effects. What's important to understand here is that as part of the FDA's approval and evaluation of these vaccines, Side effects, adverse events, and safety were all evaluated in order to receive that FDA approval. In fact, in a clinical trial, the phase 1 and the phase 2 components are specifically designed to study just safety, side effects, and adverse events. So over the course of the clinical trial, we now have a good amount of data about what types of side effects individuals might experience after getting these vaccines. What we know is that most individuals experience more severe side effects after the second dose than after the first dose, and the most commonly experienced side effects were fatigue and headache, pain at the injection site, and fever. What's important to understand here is that if you do experience any of these side effects, these are all normal and expected side effects from these vaccines. Everyone will have slightly different reactions. Some people might experience a very mild set of side effects or no side effects at all, while others might experience fever or chills or fatigue. These types of symptoms are actually just your immune system at work responding to the vaccine that's being administered, and they are completely normal. When you go to get these vaccines, you should go in and expect that you might experience these side effects: fatigue and headache, pain at the injection site, and fever. And you should also expect that you might experience more severe side effects after your second dose than after your first.